Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this discussion led by Lindsay Evans, VP of Product at KARE, State of the Careforce in Senior Living. Lindsay is VP of Product at KARE, and she brings over 20 years of experience innovating in senior living. She's passionate about solutions that make care work better. So
Mhm.
with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Lindsay, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Jared. And I hope y'all are ready for a data dump because one of the things that I love as being a head of product, and I think all of us should really focus on, is our customers and how do we get to know our customers better. And part of that is getting and gaining a lot of data and utilizing that information to tell the story of what's going on for our customers, building the customer value to then build our business value. So I'm excited to be presenting today a ton of information about the caregivers that we've gathered over the last 6 years that Care has been in the business. And without further ado, let's go through a lot of different things that we've done. And just to give a sense of quantities, we had multiple different surveys that we've done in the past. A survey that we did about 3 years ago, do you know your caregivers, with 1,300 respondents to our surveys. Then we've done actually year over year surveys to basically our caregivers who are on our platform to do a Careforce report. And so every single year we're gaining more information. And as we all know, in the past 6 years, going through COVID and out of COVID at this point in time, their responses have changed a little bit over the past 6 years. So we'll get into that. But before I start with actually exposing and demonstrating the information for our caregivers, I really want to make sure that we understand the state of the industry. We all know that there is something coming called the age wave. And what that is, that we have a number of people who are aging into the senior living population at an unprecedented rate. I actually like the term silver tsunami only because it does sound like chaos and craziness that's coming to us. And then that's not necessarily far from reality. In 2020, there was a census that was done. And as you can see, this cliff, or this like little like ledge of increase of ages between 73 and 74. So in 2020, this was the major differentiation of quantity of people aging into that next age bracket. And so that's a difference of almost 1 million people in the census. Imagine then 5 years later that all of these people are turning 78. So they're aging into this senior living population, or even assistance in home. We'll talk about home health a little bit later. But as these people are aging, we are seeing then our occupancy in senior living change. Of course, COVID had a major impact on senior living occupancy. As we can see in 2020 to 2021, there was a major drop. But since 2021, the occupancy rates have increased. So we are seeing a higher demand for caregivers in senior living because those are the workers who take care of the residents, of course. We're not quite to where we are prior to COVID. We were over 80%, and we're like dancing around that 79.8% right now. But just like looking at our occupancy trends, currently it's at 85.7%. We anticipate by the end of 2026 for us to go over 90% of occupancy. And if you really think about that increase of 4.3%, we will then need an additional number of workers of over 175, or around 175,000 additional workers than what we have right now in the senior living space. So that's a great number. We need those people. However, the actual employment of caregivers in senior living has followed the same trends. However, we have lost a lot of jobs throughout COVID. People who maybe left, who didn't come back. I know Curtis Anderson was talking earlier in his keynote speech about what we have lost, and the percentage of people who have stayed are very resilient. I would totally agree with that, with some additional data a little bit later on that Careforce. So as we're looking then at this change in the employment sector, we've lost about 35,000 jobs. And how do we recover that? So there's a couple of different things that we need to understand, especially in senior living, is that yes, senior living has lost those jobs, But also we want to understand like how has caregiving been across all of the different sectors that a caregiver could go into with any one of these markets. Our home health services has really skyrocketed. So there's a lot of opportunity for people who went to home health services. So we see that as the largest percentage of growth in employment since 2020. Next is physicians' offices, outpatient care, and assisted living facilities and hospitals. Nursing care facilities is the only negative. And so that is very concerning. As we see all of these seniors age into senior living, there is a variety of acuity needs. Some people will age and they'll be like, hey, I want to go into an independent living sector, or I want to go into an assisted living sector, or there's maybe major or higher acuity needs where somebody will have to go into the nursing home or skilled nursing facility or memory care. And that's where we're seeing then the higher need for our caregivers, and yet the employment is like really low. On top of that, challenges of employment within senior living. So we have the number that we have to gain based off of the age wave that's coming. And also, we have this challenge, of course, policy. One thing that we know right now is that prior to this year, prior to the change, and I'm not going to get political, just factual, is that there was a foreign-born makeup of caregivers in the workforce was 17.7%, and they account for 42.4% of home health care aides. And that was according to the American Immigration Council, citing 2023 Census Bureau data. With all of our immigration policies right now and the change, we have seen either deportation or self-deportation across the board. So that is also going to impact the number of people that we can employ in caregivers. So we've lost some of the employment prior because of COVID. Now we're seeing an immigration policy impact to our caregiver workforce pool, which really just means this. We have people getting older who are going to need more care. We prior to all of this happening had already then, especially with COVID, then the caregivers not having enough caregivers to handle those needs of senior living employment. Then tack on top of that competition with the market, home health care, different pieces, and then also the immigration policy. This delta is getting bigger and bigger. And our challenge, of course, is attracting caregivers into senior living to making sure that they're staying and they're being retained. So recruitment and retention are going to be the huge focuses right now and over the next 15 years in senior living. And if we really think about that just from a number standpoint, as by 2030, so this is only 5 years from now, 2.7 million CNAs and LPNs will be needed as we see more people aging into there. It's 1.2 million more than we have right now. So policies, recruitment, retention, everything needs to be geared towards taking care of and fulfilling these roles. Because the impact of that, if we don't do something now, we have 468 million shifts that will be unfilled for that year, 2030. That's crazy. So we all need to work towards something together to make an impact positively on this for sure. And one of those things that we can do is learn about who is our care force and how can we best support them in order to attract and retain. So that's the next piece of this discussion. So who is our workforce and what is their state of mind, state of being in order to best recruit and retain those people? So if we look at least these are the respondents, as I said, like around over 1,000, over 3,000, so 1,300 and 3,100 respondents to our surveys. Well, we see the vast majority of them are CNAs. A lot of them have also worked in the industry for over 10 years. So that is a great commitment. Again, the resiliency of the caregivers and nurses. There's a little bit more to that though, too, and I'll get to that in a minute. The typical working standpoint, though, is typically like it really spreads across the board. Some people just do 1 or 2 shifts a week. A lot of people do a full-time job per week, but there are still too many percentages of our caregivers are going into overtime. 31.28% of our caregivers are doing 40 to 50 hours per week. 18% are more than 50 hours. That is a huge burden. And the reason why is because we still need to take care of our residents, but we're missing a full-time staff, a fully staffed community within senior living. The other things that we know about our caregivers is that 50% of them are single, never married, and 65% of them has a child, at least one child under 26-year-old that is dependent on them. So that's something that we should think of. They're single and yet they have children. And so they are making sure that they can work around their child's schedule. So flexibility, as you'll see later, is going to be very important for them. Another piece that we see is like whether or not a caregiver is in a sandwich generation, which means that they have an adult, older adult that they're taking care of, as well as their child, and they're being that caretaker for both. We are seeing that caregivers are not necessarily in that sandwich generation as a whole, but there are at least 25% who are. So that's something to consider, that not only do our caregivers need to take care of their young children, but they also need to take care of their parents or somebody older in their family. Another piece that we wanted to look at is that what is their age? And so here are some demographics that we got back. 95% of the Careforce are women, 67% identified as Black or African American. We've already talked about the majority of people being CNAs, but a big statistic, a third of them are between 35 to 44 years old. Again, that's that age range for having that younger child at home being the dependent. People have been licensed for quite some time. Another piece to think about is that 88% do not belong to a labor union. So that's going to be an important statistic moving forward as we're looking at policies and changes, that they really are feeling like they're on an island, that nobody is defending them or nobody is advocating for them. So it is really important for us as an industry to understand their perspective and to advocate or utilize our own products to help support them in their living, work environment, all of that. Another interesting piece is their work styles. And as we asked our caregivers who are basically off of our platform, we wanted to understand what they do and how they work. 38% of workers are full-time within a community and really only pick up that 1 to 2 shifts per week. To the 22% part-time picking up shifts, only 23% of workers are full-time just on KARE, and then 17% were workers across multiple platforms. So they are looking for flexibility and multiple different working styles in order to support their lifestyle. Here is then just like an overall look at what a CNA is based off of all of this. This is Josephina. She's 36-year-old, a CNA at a nursing facility. And I love this comment of the top goal: to continue working as a full-time CNA and make money at a well-managed facility that isn't too far from her home. She needs that flexibility to be able to get home quickly. She likes to work in a well-run facility. I think a big piece of this too is making sure that she feels supported to be able to come to the work environment as her best self. So we asked a question then to all of our caregivers: what makes them stay and what makes them go? So we got some answers for this. And one of those was like, do you plan on staying in the industry? And what we found was a resounding yes. People who are in the industry want to stay in the industry. It is a very mission-based industry. You're taking care of residents, you're getting very personally connected to your residents. They feel like family. And so you want to continue to come into the same place over and over again. And will sacrifice a lot in order to do that, in order to continue to take care of the people that they love. 14% said no, that they will not stay in the industry. So that is a positive on us continuing to retain our Careforce for sure. The reasons why they would leave, the number one reason is limited economic and career advancement. So 29% saying low pay. So this is really interesting for us because what we want to understand is, okay, what does that mean if there's limited economic and career advancement? Mainly, they want a path to increase their skills, to get to the next level, and to continuously not only earn wealth and pay, but also to get better and to continuously advance themselves. Another major topic is workplace burnout and employee well-being. So they're burnout. As you saw on the previous slide, almost 50% are working more than 40 hours a week at a community. And sometimes the reason why is because they have to, because they are a lower paid echelon. Again, the majority of these respondents were CNAs. So other things that we want to talk about is then that pay rate. So interestingly, from 2019 to 2023, we have seen an average CNA wage go up. It went up from 14.77, so $14.77 an hour, up to 1904. This is great. This is fantastic. However, as the economics of business and senior living, especially when it comes to skilled nursing, because that's very needs-based, is a little challenging. So again, how can we utilize our businesses to help advocate for that CNA to be paid more? Another thing of when you leave senior living, which industry do you plan on joining? So the top answer was going back to school to advance themselves outside of the industry. But then the next one is acute care and hospital. So those are their top two reasons. So they really are looking to level up or to get into something that's maybe possibly a higher pay in acute care and hospital. So those are some interesting things that we should look at. All right. Why do you want to stay in senior living? And the top one is the strong relationships with residents and brings me fulfillment and purpose. Like I said, incredibly mission driven. Talking to these caregivers and how they talk about the residents is one of the joys of my job because I get to see their face light up of how they were maybe a bus driver for a community, loved the residents, had an opportunity to become a CNA, passed the CNA test, and now they're inside taking care of those residents every day. It's an incredible conversation, it's incredible stories, and that's just one out of just a vast many that I've heard. So really great stuff about the caregivers to help you contextualize. So some of the keys to retention and recruitment: flexible schedule options, number one. Number two, their answer was a safe work environment. And we're not talking about safe as in the safety protocols of making sure that there's no wet floors. We're really talking about how these caregivers come to work every day with everything of their experience in their whole entire lifetime. One thing that we found was that the caregivers in this space have a lot of adverse childhood experiences. So we did a survey to understand when a caregiver shows up, what are they showing up with? What is their lifetime experience and how will they handle stressful situations? Because taking care of somebody that looks different than you, who acts different from a different generation, is stressful. We put out a survey asking them some questions about their adverse childhood experiences. Here's a little snapshot of who responded to that survey. And just really briefly, we can see that if you have no adverse childhood experience and you have basically are really emotionally well, you can handle stressful situations. The more adverse childhood experiences that somebody has, the more challenging it is for attention, impulse behavior, making decisions, emotional capacity. So we wanted to understand how this could impact the Careforce. When we talked about the US population, 64% have at least one type of ACE. The Careforce in senior living has 73%. So that's almost a 10% increase based off of the US population. This is where it's really scary though. Four or more types of ACEs, the US population is at 17%, our Careforce is at 34%. So when our Careforce is coming into the community and they're having a negative reaction to an event that happens that you maybe as a manager or you as a business owner and product person sees, that we really want to transfer our conversation from what is wrong with you to what happened to you. And there's a lot of variety of ways to do that, but I would just like to leave you with this, is that we need to be aware of those experiences, so aware of the trauma that's happening, be educated and sensitive to the fact that they may be bringing something else to the situation from their past. So we need to be sensitive to that, and then maybe work towards ways that we can help to eradicate those behaviors and even making sure that they are trauma informed. So whatever we can do to help support the Careforce as they're working through this trauma, we need to think about and look at that. So again, not what happened to you, but not what is wrong with you, but what happened to you. that's how we need to approach situations. All right. Last piece of data, and I'm almost out of time, but is the Net Promoter Score. So we really wanted to understand also how likely is it for somebody that's a Careforce to recommend their profession to a friend or a colleague. And we were really surprised with the results. If we think about Net Promoter Score, anything below 0 is negative. Good is from 0 to 30, great is from 30 to 70, and excellence from 70 to 100. Very rarely do companies get into the excellence. Even Starbucks is not an excellence. Starbucks might be like good or great. Facebook, the same. I think Facebook is in kind of the lower good, and then other companies too that you can think of. But we were really surprised that the Net Promoter Score for our respondents was 38. So that's pretty good. We were really surprised by that. Or that's actually great. That's in the great category, just above the good. Okay. But when we looked at it divided by all of our respondents, the highest one was CMAs. And that makes a lot of sense to me because they maybe don't have the full responsibility of a nurse, but they are doing a little bit of higher than just regular activities of daily living like the CNA. But the CNA is also very high. The one that was shocking was that the registered nurse was so much lower than all of the others. So the registered nurse only put on 12. That's still in the good space, but has a lot of work to do. And as we dug into it a little bit further with the registered nurses and got some responses back to them, they don't feel psychologically and interpersonally safe. So these are some things that we need to think about as we are, again, building programs or products around especially registered nurses. They don't feel like they have a sense of community. They disagree. They're able to be their true, authentic self. 34%, 18% feels unrecognized. So a lot of data. I'm surprised that I got through it all this time. So what can we do? What do we do now? We really have to think about creating a safe and supportive environment. Understanding what they bring to the table is a lifetime of experience, and especially as we saw, 4 or more ACEs. So we got to be very empathetic to what they're coming to the table with and making sure they feel safe within their workspace to be able to be their true authentic self. Support flexible scheduling. They want that flexibility to be able to then take care of their children or their adult dependents, as well as being able to then, of course, we want to make sure that they have the recognition that they're doing a great job, even walking around or sending a text message if you're remote and you have an app saying, we see you, we think you're doing great, thank you so much for what you do. So recognize them and allow them to have opportunities for professional development. And the last I'll leave with you is data is so important. Understanding your customer, building that value to them will help to build your business value. And so that's what we as product people do. We look at what are the problems to solve, but really what is valuable, the most valuable thing to our users. And the best way you can do that is by asking them questions. So if you want to, here is a QR code to download some of our white papers that we've had. A lot more data is in there than what I went through today. There's also, here's the trauma report too. And I think that this presentation may be available later, so that way you can look at these later. And that is it. I know, 5 minutes to go. That was great.
Yeah, you definitely filled the time well with a lot of great data and information. So thanks for that, Lindsay. So of course there are some questions and we do have time to answer a few of them at least.
Sure.
One of the questions is what role do mentorship and peer support programs play in helping caregivers feel valued and see a future within their organizations?
Yeah, I think those are two really great possibilities. I think if going back to the trauma piece, if you do have somebody who has gone through it or is more reflective and being able to see the experience outside of the experience and being able to coach somebody through, especially any negative reaction, I think that is huge for the person to see, okay, what is going on? Why am I reacting in this certain way? And can I do better? And is there a pathway to do better? I think that's great. I think where I've seen struggle is when people they don't feel that sense of belonging or a sense of community. They really feel like they're on an island. And so having a peer support or a mentorship program, I think is a great first step, or even company policy to instill to help support the caregivers so that way they do feel that sense of community. They have somebody to go to, they feel comfortable and they trust that person will have their back, but also trust the person will help guide them through whatever experience that they're in.
Got it. Thank you. Another question that popped in is about whether you see this idea of humanoid robots playing a role in closing the gap in the care workforce availability by 2030.
Oh, that is a good question. That is a really good question. And I think that there's a lot of tentacles to that answer, or a lot of considerations that need to be had. It's always about what is, I do feel that in general, there is something to be said about human connection and human touch. And I think that when it comes to like robots, there are absolutely avenues for robots to be able to help facilitate efficiency, facilitate accuracy on a lot of different things too, and to be a tool to be used in order to provide the best care. I'm just the type of person where I see senior living with this gap, and I totally understand where robots or something else could fill that possibility. You still need people to know how to operate them, how to program them. I think that they're in senior living, especially. There will be assistance with robots, but not a full replacement of caregiving for a resident with robots. I think it's going to be this mashup of helping maybe offload some of the repetitive tasks or offload some of the different pieces of it. But I think that there is something to be said of, would you want somebody walking in all the time and having it be a robot help you do all the things? There's some things that I think human intuition, human connection trumps at some point in time.
Yep,
Mhm.
makes sense. So it's more of a both and or hybrid approach.
For sure, for sure. I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to be a full replacement.
Right, got it. Cool. And then we have time for one more question, and this one is, how have the demographic pay flexibility of caregivers shifted before and after COVID? So
Yeah.
it's a big question for the amount of time we have, but just take a shot at it.
Yeah, big question. I know Curtis answered this question a little bit earlier today. I do think that the opportunity for flexibility and programs and systems to be able to provide that flexibility has changed the workforce a lot. And that really has only been coming up over the last like 6 years. So I see that the demographics of the workforce being able to pick up shifts when they want to, whether or not they're fully employed with the community. And I see that with a lot of scheduling platforms are allowing that more specifically now, and allowing for people to make their own schedules as they need to, versus where I'm in the more marketplace space where people post shifts and then we're having caregivers wanting that flexibility, and especially even not being full-time workers at a location. I think that's going to continuously drive forward. I think that we just need the guardrails in place of who can work what shifts and what is possible to be making sure that gets automated a little bit more.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay, great. So I think that is it for our time, unfortunately, but we will make your slides available for folks to consider after the event.
Thanks.
So thanks for that. And of course, thanks for your leading us in this discussion. Very insightful, and we appreciate all the data. So thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Jared.